Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai, and today I'm going to be showing you how to style bonsai from collected material. Alright, so this is the tree that we're going to be working on in this video today. If you've seen the previous video that I made on how to make bonsai from collected material, this is the piece of material that we had collected. This was dug up from my grandmother's garden. It was like in the back, growing against the fence. I think a bird might have just dropped the seeds in and it was just allowed to grow for a couple of years. The species that I have got here is a Lonicera, also known as a hedging honeysuckle, and I believe the specific variety is a Lonicera natita. And if you see my videos before, you'll know that I'm such a big fan of this species for bonsai because they just grow so vigorously. When I planted this 1 year ago, it basically had no foliage and I just let it go to its own devices. And as you can see, 1 year later, it's just exploded with growth. Even looking at the bottom of this tree, the roots have completely filled the pond basket. So it's also going to need a repot today. And now before we start, the tools that I'll be using throughout this video today are branch cutters, twig cutters or Satsuki shears, wire cutters, a chopstick, root pruning shears, root cutters, and some gin pliers. Now if you're a beginner to bonsai, it may be a little bit intimidating to see all these specialized tools right away and think, I don't have these, how can I do bonsai? You don't necessarily have to have all of these tools to get a particular job done. Just use whatever you have at your disposal. Instead of using, twig cutters, you could use some garden scissors or some secateurs. You just want to make sure that whatever tool that you are using is clean and sharp. Clean so we don't introduce any bacterial or fungal infections to our trees, and sharp because a sharp blade will give you a much cleaner cut on a branch or twig. And in horticulture, clean cuts heal so much faster and more efficiently than a blunt cut that was squashed by a dull blade. Now when you got a piece of bonsai material like this, whether it be from a garden centre, bonsai nursery, or if you've just collected it yourself and grown it in a pot just to get it healthy over the next couple of years, when it comes time to style it, it can be a little bit intimidating if you are a beginner as to what to prune, where to prune, how the future style of the tree is going to look, even how much to prune. You may be afraid of pruning off too much at one time. So I do recommend that whatever species that you are working with whatever material that you've collected, research the species, find out what it can handle at one time, find out how often they like to be pruned. This one is a very vigorously growing species, so I know I can prune this really harshly today on the top and the roots at the same time. But if you're working with species like conifers, like junipers, pines, even a taxus, they don't really like the roots and the top to be worked on at the one time. If you are going to work on one or the other, I recommend working on the roots first, because you could have a nice tree on the top, it could look amazing, but if the roots are in bad health, then you're putting stress on the top and the bottom of the tree at the one time. So get the roots healthy, then move to the top in another couple of years. But with deciduous trees that lose their leaves, like this one or even Japanese maples, they can tolerate pruning on the bottom and top, as long as you don't go too crazy with it. So looking at this tree right away, I can see there's a lot of long shoots that I probably won't need, and it can be really tempting to just cut these off right away and think like, oh, I'm never going to need them, I'll get rid of it. But I like to actually go look inside the planting, see what's going on. And now that I see this branch here, I can see this is actually going to be a good leader for this tree. This one back here, this would be known as a competing trunk line. It's just way too thick in comparison with the trunk. So for that reason, I'm going to cut that off. The first thing you want to do when styling a tree is select a front. And this is the front of the tree where you think it looks the best. So it's also known as like the preferred viewing angle. Maybe this side could look nice. I quite like this as a front, and I think I decided this was my front last year. But I think it's really important in bonsai never to get stuck in your ways, because as a tree grows and develops, for example, maybe this was my front last year, but maybe this year the tree grows something, or I notice a new feature that would lend itself better to being a different front. So always stay flexible as you're developing something, and you'll always find the best option that you like. I still quite like this as the front, so I'm gonna go with that as my front and style the tree based on this. And right away, I really want to emphasize the split in the trunk, and I don't want any of the branches coming in towards the center here. So already right away, I'm just going to take the twig cutters and remove any branches that is growing in here. And there's many different styles of bonsai: formal, upright, slanted, literati, even a cascade is quite a nice style. I'm not the biggest fan of cascades, but they can look nice sometimes. So when you're styling your tree, it's probably not always going to look like this one. Do a little bit of research on the different styles of tree, or even go out, take inspiration from nature. You know, go out, have a nice walk in nature, look up at the trees, have a little look at the branch structure, see how the older trees are growing in the wild. Look at the negative space between the branches, the taper of the trunk. And then when you come back and work on your bonsai, you can really emphasize the parts that you've seen in nature that resonated with you. So as you can see, all that I have done was just remove any of the branches growing in towards the center, and already this is beginning to look like a bonsai. Really simple thing, but it makes such a big difference. And I'm thinking, do I want to spread these out more? Do I want to have them together? I'm not really the biggest fan of sort of Y-shaped trees, but I think with this one, I can make it work. Already I'm looking at this, and this is going to be a competing trunk line if I let this branch grow anymore. So I'm just going to cut that off here. I want to promote all of these sort of fine, delicate branches, and this will help make the tree look a little bit more mature and in proportion as a bonsai. This one up here is quite heavy. Just thinning out the branches, making it a little bit easier to work with. As you can see here, in this spot of the tree, there's 2 branches growing from the one spot. And if you leave 2 branches growing like this at the base, you'll get a swelling on the trunk, and it will begin to sort of look like a golf ball, especially at the apex here. And we really don't want that. And that swelling is known as inverse taper. Generally, it's not considered nice on a tree. So I'm gonna get rid of one of these branches, and I think I'm gonna remove the thickest one and just allow this thinner one to take its place. And then I just want to fix some of this stubs on the tree. Even then, there is some inverse taper in this spot. I can see a swelling, and just trying to get rid of it by growing another branch isn't really an option, because it will just help thicken it even more in this spot. So I'm going to take it off completely down to there. And it's somewhat of the same problem on this one. There's a swelling. Maybe if I take this down just a little bit, it looks a little bit nicer there. So bringing this tree back to the front, always remember that whenever you're styling a tree, bring it back to the front and see how it looks that way. It looks a little bit more in proportion for the height of the tree and the thickness of the trunk. Even if I wanted to, I could probably bring this tree down to here and have a little mini Y-shaped tree. And that actually, maybe that could be a good thing. If I were to do that and cut it to here, then I'm making a tree that looks like the majority of trees that you would see, where if I keep these both slender, sort of unconventional, unusual looking trunks, I think we can make something really unique. So I'm going to keep these. I'm going to work with what the tree gives us at the moment. We got some branches going here. There is a branch at the back here, which I don't know about. Should I keep this? Because if I take this off, the tree then looks very two-dimensional with no depth at the back. But I think if I keep this here, that will just add something else, because it can very easily turn into a two-dimensional tree by just removing this. I will keep it for now, but perhaps in the future when we get more branches coming out the back, I can take this thicker one off. Just to reduce the vigor in this, I'm just going to snip the ends of the branches on it, just to there. This branch is too low. Again, there's 2 branches coming from this one spot here. There's 2 branches coming from this spot here. So I'm going to take the one growing towards the viewer out. Okay, so I think now we've thinned the tree out pretty well. And of course, with the parts that you cut off, you can turn them into cuttings and grow new trees from these. You can either cut just below a node or pull a branch off from a heel to get a heel cutting. Strip off the lower branches, dip it into some hormone rooting powder with the active ingredient IBA, also known as indole 3-butyric acid. This will just accelerate the rooting. Then plant the cutting into some soil. You want it planted half the depth as the cutting is long, so I'd plant this one up to here and it should root. Here is some that I took last year, little Lonicera cuttings. As you can see, roots all over. Very successful and very easy to root from cuttings, and you can create little sort of mame style bonsais from this. As you can see, look at that one, so many roots. The tree looks pretty bare right now, but this is for the best because we've removed a lot of the problems with the tree, and then we can keep all these little good ones to build a good first styling and structure on the tree. So I'm going to start by wiring this branch to this branch. It's good practice in bonsai to follow what is known as the 2-branch principle, and this is essentially wiring 2 branches together with 1 piece of wire. So I'm going to take some 1.5mm aluminium bonsai wire. I'm going to measure it along this branch, around and down that branch. Just taking the wire cutters, I'm going to cut this here. So I'm going to start by just wiring along this branch, and it helps to get the wire started if you push it in against the elbow of the branch. You just hold it here with your thumb, you can come around the branch, and you want each coil that you go around the branch to be the same distance apart. A lot of dead branches down here I can remove. Then with the other end of the wire, I'm going to come around the trunk the whole way around and down. I'm gonna go around even again. That way I can come up around the bottom. You can strip off some of these leaves to make it easier, and around this branch. And with each wrap, you're holding the wire with your fingers just to provide a little bit more support. That way you don't snap the branch. If you're just learning wiring, I recommend just taking your time. As you can see, as I get to the end here, I'm going to make what's known as an open coil, and that is simply wiring as if the branch is thicker than it is to make an open coil to guide the branch in the direction of growth. And just as I've wired these two branches, I'm going to wire all the other branches on this tree in the same fashion. And now that I look at this and I see all the other branches wired, I haven't styled it yet, but when I see this, it really bothers me because I can see branches up here coming out the back that are going to add depth when they grow. And if this is here, this could shelter out light from getting to these ones, and these could die off. So I don't mind the tree looking two-dimensional for a while. It's going to look very flat, as you can see, but these ones are going to develop, and I'll probably get more along here as light and air hits these parts. So now I'm going to begin styling the tree, and this part's really up to you. How do you want the tree to look? If you wanted, you could give these branches lots of bends and twists and turns and make it look really unique, or you could go for the snow load look where, you know, in winter when the snow hits the branches it pulls them down, and then in spring they grow again, so it comes up like that, so it has sort of like a lifting motion. You could even do all of them like this and you can get a really natural effect. I'm going to take this top one, point it up because this is the new leader. This one can come over here. So this is another way you could style it, something really simple like that. I'm just going to shorten some of these branches with the wire cutters because these can cut through wire too, so I'm going to shorten this into here. That's just a little bit long. There's some extra pieces of wire. This branch here is a little long, so I'm going to cut that into here. Even then, these two branches are pretty close. I'm going to get rid of that one. Even just cut this to here. That's all I'm going to do on the top part of this tree. I pruned it pretty harshly just to get a basic structure and some branches in the places I want them to be. Let's try and get this out of the pot first by pulling on the trunk. If it doesn't come out, don't force it because you may damage the trunk. This seems to be coming out pretty well here if I just bend this around. So as you can see, again, just 1 year. Look at that. Completely filled the pond basket. So to start working on the roots, I'm simply taking the chopstick and I'm going to begin just raking outward from the trunk. And what I'm doing and what my goal is simply to loosen up the old soil and to see more of the root structure. So just raking outward. And when I work on the roots, I'm always working outward from the trunk in all directions. Never do I want to grab from over here and pull it around the trunk, because by doing this, this would tear through the lateral growing roots that we want to keep. And whenever I hold the chopstick, I'm not holding it really firmly and sort of scraping the roots. Just lightly hold the chopstick and rake through. And any of the roots that it sort of snags on, instead of tearing by holding it firmly, it'll just slide in your hand. Now when repotting, if it's a hot or windy day, I highly recommend keeping a spray bottle of water nearby just to mist the roots so that they don't dry out, because if the roots do dry out, they're essentially dead. So you want to keep them nice and hydrated at all times. Alright, so now that I've raked out the top layer, I'm just going to turn this on its side and just loosen up the soil here. And as you can see, this is like a thick mat of roots, and we're probably not going to need all of these. So what I'm going to do here is do what is known as like cutting the cake. I think Peter Chan calls it this. I'm just going to take a slice down through all the roots. So this is just an old bonsai saw. I'm just going to slice down through here. So as you can see, we just cut off all of this. All this was going to be pruned anyways, it's just way too much root, so it's completely safe to do this. So again, just going in with the chopstick. And whenever you work on trees, the branches on the top are quite delicate, so you always want to ensure you're holding it well. It's not going to hit anything on the table and knock off the branches. And again, whenever I work on the underside of the root ball, I'm working outward from the trunk, just as I did on the top. And this just ensures that all the roots are growing in the right direction. We're not tearing through any nice lateral roots again. And really just take your time with this to loosen up the old soil. And I think if I had left this for another 1 year, this probably would have become extremely pot bound, because as it is right now, I would consider this pot bound. It's just so dense of roots. Okay, Look at this. Okay, there's so many roots on this and they're all nice and fine and fibrous, and that is probably why this tree put on so much growth on the top. I can't believe how many roots this tree produced in just 1 year. Like, to me, this is just crazy. And the greatest thing about using nice, free draining, granular bonsai soil is you don't really have to wash the roots because there's no compost stuck to them. All the grains of bonsai soil just fall out and it makes the roots really easy to work on. So to work on the roots of this tree, all I want to do is just prune off some of the growing tips of the roots. I'm going to give these a nice prune the whole way around. We just got plenty of feeder roots here, so we don't really need to worry about cutting too much off. There is more than enough roots to go around on this one. And again, I want to just take off a little bit on the bottom too, make this root ball nice and flat. And I want to balance the vigor across the whole root ball. So if I see that it's growing too heavy on one side and not enough on the other, I'll prune the heavier sides. That way the energy can be distributed evenly across the whole root base. This is a weird root here growing backwards towards everything, so I'm going to remove that. With the chopstick, I'm just raking the roots out because I want all the roots, every single root on the whole thing, to go outward. I'm just raking them the whole way around, and anyone that doesn't go outward like I want, if it's too thick and it curls around, I'm going to cut them off. Let's see, this is all nice and lateral here. These roots here are all growing up, which is a little bit strange, so I'm going to cut them off. So right down here, this is a big, massive, sort of thick root that I don't want because it's growing underneath where I want the Nibari to come from. I think this might have been from last year. I kept this just because it was the only thing here, but now we've got lots of roots, so we can safely remove it. All right, look at that. I want to take this in as far as I can. So now if you look at the roots, there's a big gap where we just cut off the big thick root here, and it doesn't really look even the whole way around. So I'm going to put this back into the pond basket this year in order to regrow this section of the root base. Another big thick root there. Let's get rid of that one. This root here, look at this. This comes out and straight down that way, which isn't really nice, but I think with this one we could keep it. Let's see, that one back here is pretty nice. See how that flares down into the soil? I really wish this one was doing that. So let's just get rid of this and see what happens. So we get rid of that there. There isn't many roots attached to it, which is good. So I'll leave that like that. And then maybe in the next year we can get more roots coming from here. I really like to take my time with root work and make sure I get everything right, because if I don't get it right now, I'll have to come back and correct more mistakes next year. So the roots are now really getting to a place that I want, but there's just something that's bothering me, and if I take this, sort of sit this tree flat, look what happens. It hits a big thick root instead of sitting where I want it to sit. Tilted looks nice. Even, what if that is the style? Maybe in the future, but there is a problem where there's a thick root under the Nibari here, and right now it's not a problem because we can put this into the pond basket again, get all the roots nice and healthy for another year. But when the time comes, whenever I want to put this tree into a bonsai pots are quite shallow. Just taking this pot as an example, if I put this in here, that big thick root hits the base of the pot and I can no longer get all these nice roots into the pot. So I would have to compromise and go for that slanted, and that would be my only option. So at this stage we can come in, correct that mistake, take the root cutters and just cut off that thick part that's stopping everything from going in. If I cut these correctly, it should sit flat, maybe even a little more. Ah, okay, we got it. So now if I sit it like this, it sits how we want and all the roots can go in the pot. And the final thing to do is just to even out the root flare, because some parts are a little bit longer than others. I want to just give this a nice even distribution of roots the whole way around, so I don't want them to go too far in one direction. Then I'm going to cut any roots that's growing straight down. Now to plant this back into the pond basket, it doesn't have to be any fresh new soil. I'm going to be reusing the soil that came out of it. Honestly, with this species they grow in more or less anything, so it's okay just to reuse the old soil. Maybe even I could take this root ball even shorter because it's hitting the edge of the pond basket. Let's go half again. That's even less roots, but I'm sure this tree will thrive. Here I'm actually going to create a little mountain, and again this mix is a mix of pumice, akadama and lava rock. And even at this point I'm actually thinking maybe I'll put a rock under here just to stop roots growing straight down. That way more of the energy can be put into roots growing to the sides. So I'm just going to put this rock in here, nothing fancy, and I'm going to put this down like that. Then we go with more soil. And then with a small chopstick, I'm going to work out any of the air gaps that may be in the soil. We do this simply because anywhere that there is air gaps in the soil is areas in which water can't reach the roots. So if there's roots in air pockets, they tend to like shrivel up and die. So you want to keep all the roots nice and healthy. And also by working out the air gaps, this will give our tree a lot more stability in the pot. And now just to top up the rest of the pot, taking some fresh soil, just putting it in here, just to help it reach the top again. Then I'm going to work this in. And then after working all the soil in, and even after repotting a tree in general, what I like to do is take some sphagnum moss. This is just a really light and aerated moss that I put on the top surface level of the soil. And this will just help keep the humidity levels up in the soil throughout the growing season as it comes into the hotter months. It's a light layer of moss on the top. And then finally, just to keep the tree in place, if you wanted to, you could wire it in. But in this case, I'm just going to take some rocks, put them on here on either side. That'll just weigh the tree down until the roots fill out. But all that is left to do now is give this tree a water. And there you guys have it. On that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like on this video. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And please let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Perhaps there is something that you would have done differently with this collected material today. I'd love to hear your guys' ideas. And also let me know if you have tried this species yourself. I really love it for bonsai. If you'd like to support me and the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. Or if you would like to become a channel member, hit the join button. That way you'll get early access to new videos before they go out to everyone else. And you will get access to membership posts. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.